God is doing some awesome things in each and every one of us. And something that we have to be willing to do is go home and tell our friends. Because many times God does a work in us, but we don't really know how to share it, or maybe we don't want to share it. We just kind of want to hold it to ourselves. But it's so important that we realize when God does a work in us, when God is working even in the process of working in us, it's so important that we go and open ourselves up to our friends and tell them of the things that God has done for us. We can't be afraid to share our testimony. We can't be afraid to share with people what God is doing in us or what God has done in us, because you never know who your testimony is going to affect. And also, one thing about sharing our testimony and going around and sharing it is, how many of you ever like, you sing a song one time and it's like, man, I kind of know that song. Then you sing it again, you know the song a little bit. All the singers raise their hand, yeah, I know. Then you sing the song again and you know it. By the time you sing the song 5 times, it's like, okay, I got this song, right? The more we say and share our testimony, the more confident we're going to become with that testimony. And again, sometimes like singing a song over and over again, the more you sing it, the more it's like, wow, these words are like really impacting me. Or the more I read a certain verse in the Bible, the more it comes to life. That's the same thing that can happen with our testimony, is if we share it over and over again, we become more confident, and even the testimony itself can start working in us again. The more you think of things, the more comfortable you're able to become with those things. Also in John 4:39, this is going back to talk about the story that we were talking about at the beginning, about the woman at the well. It says, and many of the Samaritans of that city believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified it. She said, he told me all that I ever did. Because the woman had an experience with God and then decided to go into the city and share her testimony and testify the things that the Lord did with her, the city believed in him. Isn't that crazy to think? Because sometimes we think like, little of me, how would I be able to change anyone? Well, God uses us as a vessel to change people. We don't change people. But when we are willing to open our mouth, when we're willing to share what God has done in us, we are able to change that city. And we can't think of ourselves as just little old me. How am I ever going to be able to do anything? But we have to realize that God is great. God is powerful. He's the creator of heaven and earth. He's the creator of each and every one of us. And when he's using us as our vessel, as his vessel, he becomes our strength. He becomes our word. He becomes everything that we need to be able to go out and share that testimony. And yes, you could change a city, just like the woman at the well. The word testify means to talk about or say something in an honest and confident way. It also means to show that something is true or real, to give proof of something. So many people want proof of Jesus. Well, I can't see him, so how do I know that he's real? Because he's done something in your life. That's how we can be living proof that he's real, because we can testify of the things that God has done and worked in our lives. You never ever know who your testimony is going to be able to reach. You never know by the things that you're doing, the things that you're saying, who's going to see it and say, wow, I can just tell that something is different in her. I can just tell that something is different in him, and I want what they have. We are that living testimony. And you also never know how your testimony will impact other people. And I know my mom, she's here, she's so awesome. She has shared this story so many times to so many people about how this girl visited her one time. How old were you? She was 19. How old was the girl? 15. A 15-year-old visited my mom's house and told her about Jesus Christ. Led her to the Lord and never to be seen again. A 15-year-old changed a 19-year-old's life. And here my mom is, only 20 years later, serving the Lord with everything that I've never met someone besides her who has loved Jesus so much. Because a 15-year-old, that's kind of like intimidating, 15 to 19. I know 4 years difference isn't that big of a deal when you're my age, but like 15 to 19, that's like a freshman going to someone in college and saying like, you have to see the things that God's done in my life, and he wants to do the same things in your life. And because that girl was willing to share her testimony, because that girl was willing to share with my mom the things that Jesus has done and said, Jesus can do these same things for you. She is where she is today, and I am where I am today, all because this girl who is 15 decided to do that, right? So you never know who your testimony is going to impact, and you never know how your testimony is going to impact the people around you. So again, the woman at the well, because Jesus came up to her and he's like, hey, I know that you and your husband, what? I don't have a husband. I know, you're actually just living with someone. You've already had 5 husbands. That's kind of a crazy thing, right? So he came to her, she was changed, went to the city, shared her testimony, and a city was changed because she shared her testimony. All that to say is God is doing something in you, and maybe you're thinking, I don't have a testimony. God's working in you right now, and you may not even know it. But we have to start declaring with confidence the things that God is doing inside of each and every one of us. And in Daniel 3, I'm going to read 28 to 29. It says, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, this is the king saying, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. That's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When he wanted everyone to kneel down and worship him, they said, we're not doing it. And he said, if you don't do it, you're going to be thrown into the fiery furnace. And they said, we're not doing it. They were thrown into the furnace. God saved them. And their testimony changed a king who changed a nation. That's all that to say is we have that impact. Your testimony, again, not only has to be words, but it can be in the actions, in the way that you live your life. And again, this is what happened here with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We have impact, and it's time to start realizing how big of an impact that you can have on the people around you, on your community, and around who you never even know who. So you never know the people that you're able to impact, and that's why we believe here at Mount Zion at 412 that testimonies are so important, because you can share a story that can change someone else. So with that being said, we're going to have some testimonies from camp tonight, and I want to call up Miles.
I remember when the campers first showed up, I saw who I had, and I just looked, and there was just a bunch of like little 9th graders that were already hyperactive and just looked like they were off the wall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this. And I remember Nick looked at me, I was like, oh, this is going to be a tough one. I was like, oh, and that just got me so scared. And like the first 5 minutes we get in the cabin, as soon as they put their stuff down, they start wrestling and throwing stuff around, and they made like a racist joke at me or something like that. And then we're going over the rules, and one of my campers comes up to me and is like, oh, can I see those rules? And they hold it like, this is what I think of them, and they throw it out the cabin. And I'm like, whoa, this is gonna be really bad. You know, like. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to prepare for this. And I'm just so afraid because, you know, it's 9th grade. That's only like 4 years behind. And I'm thinking like, they're going to look at me and like, you're a fraud. Like, you're not old enough to tell me what to do. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like what do I got to do? So I'm trying to keep like a straight face and like, be like, you know, like I know what I'm doing. Like you guys, you know, sit down. This is what we're going to do. You know, we're going to have fun at camp and stuff like that. And, but by the end of the first day, everything was so cool. Like I got to know the guys, and I remember after there were a few that were rowdy, but after wrestling around with them, they finally listened, knew who was the authority, you know. And as the week progressed, I started noticing how they when I talked to them during the devotions, that even though they were very hyperactive, they listened to the words that I was saying. I could just see that they were understanding and taking this stuff to heart. And as the week progressed, I could just see that they really looked up to me. Like when I said something, they were like, wow, that's pretty interesting. I can't believe like you did that, or things like that. I remember at the end of the week, I told my boys something on like the first day of devotionals about my testimony. And then at the very last day, they mentioned it again. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you remembered that. I thought they were just, you know, just throwing stuff and not listening or anything like that. But at the end of the week, they were like hugging me and telling me how like, man, like we really love you as a counselor, and like you're so chill, but yeah, we just like having fun with you. And they were telling me like, I hope you're my counselor next year. Like I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe. No, But at the end, it was weird. Like at the beginning of the camp, I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are gonna hate me. They're not gonna listen. But by the end of the week, I could really see that they looked up to me as like an authority and like someone that they could come to if they needed help and if they had any problems. And I just really, it really shocked me because I've never been in a position where people were looking up to me and like my choices and my decision mattered, and they really cared about what I thought. And just seeing that in these young guys, and I could see the potential of them to grow into nice young men, and I was just so happy that I was able to be a part of that.
Awesome. I'm gonna call up Paul.
And I realized that no matter how strong I act, or how I feel like I can take all these things will still affect me, and I'm still weak at points. But it was an amazing experience, and I realized through camp that my priorities weren't straight. I was talking to one of our campers, and in devotions he was telling us how his priorities weren't straight, and once he realized that he had to fix his priorities, things started finally falling into place. And I kind of took that and I was like, wow, then maybe that's what I need to do with my life, like fix my priorities. Because I was putting all the struggles in my life before God. And that was kind of selfish of me, and I realized that. And through the week, I finally realized that I need to put God before those problems, and obviously God will fix those problems. It was so humbling, and as a middle schooler, I got bullied a lot. That's my testimony. I got bullied a lot. I got put in the ground a lot. I didn't really believe in God. My mom always pressed me to come to church. I love my mom to death, but you know how moms can be. You need to go to church. You need to do this. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do that because you're telling me to do it. So, but she definitely tried to press that on me, and I was like, and that kind of like, I didn't want to do it. And I got bullied a lot, and I had a lot of stuff going on in my life, and it made me a really insecure person. And I got better as high school went on, but I noticed when we were writing in our JV journals and we were doing our devotions, I realized how insecure I still am. And writing all that stuff down was just like, wow, I didn't really realize that this stuff was still affecting me, because obviously I'm still holding on to it if I'm still writing it down in the JV journal. It's just amazing that I got to be a camper one more year, and I thank God so much for doing that for me. And I definitely took a lot in, seeing people get saved in our cabin, and seeing how close our cabin was, and seeing how God works in so many great ways is just an amazing experience. And I just wish everybody could experience that. But I just love camp, and I loved all the counselors. Most of you guys are counselors, and I just want to thank you guys for making my last year amazing. I already said that, but I can't. I could say it 1,000 more times. You guys were awesome, and thank you so much for definitely giving me a little bit more peace in my life. And I can promise you now that God has worked in me, and God has fixed my priorities, and I'm definitely a stronger person leaving camp. So.
Sasha.
But I have been to camp every single year since I was, I think, 7th grade is when we started. And this year I moved away. I moved to Alabama for 8 months. And it was kind of like I don't know, like I didn't know anybody. So basically I was, besides Nick, thank you for being there for me. But besides him, I didn't know anybody. And I spent 8 months pretty much just reading the Bible, just doing devotionals every day, and kind of just fixing my relationship with God. And I knew the whole time that I was going to be coming back for camp. And hold on, I got to breathe. Okay. I knew I would be coming back from camp, but I was still nervous because God never really used me as a vessel. I would always pray over the girls, and I would just speak in tongues over them, but I never really got to, be the vessel for them and let God speak through me. And so I was really nervous this year. I'm not really sure why. My heart just wasn't in it. And then I went to the camp meeting, and I found out who my counselor was, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know this girl at all. And I'm going into camp, and I'm meeting 10 other girls, and I'm like, it would help if I knew my co-counselor. That made me nervous. And then I get to camp, and every year I've had literally the same girls, like since they were younger, probably like 3 years ago till now, I've had the same girls. So I knew their issues, and I was close to them. But this year I had a completely different age group, and that made me nervous again. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, my heart's not in this. I shouldn't be going. And then what happens? My co-counselor gets sick. So it's me and 10 other girls, and we don't know each other. And I broke down, and I went back to my cabin on my off time, and this was 2 days in, and my co-counselor was at the nurses, and she wasn't even in our cabin, and I was just not in the best place. So I go back to my cabin on my off time, and I just started praying, and I just started asking God to give me peace and give me the answer to all these girls, all their questions and stuff. And so I just had quiet time, and then after my off, I went back out, and it was literally like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Like, I knew all these girls, and all of a sudden we started bonding in a way that we hadn't before. And then I started speaking to other girls out of my cabin. Like, random girls would come up to me crying, and I would just pray over them, and that was the first time that God used me and spoke through me, and it was indescribable. I can't even explain how it felt. But for those of you that God's never spoken through you, I encourage you to pray and just seek him more, because it's not you. He's waiting for that right time, for the perfect time for him to be able to use you in the way that he's known your whole life. And I feel like a new person coming home, and I'm excited to see where he takes me from here. So.
Denzel.
I'm continuing to pray, and I'm continuing to go to God, and I'm doing the devotions. And I thank Billy for, where are you at, Billy? There you are. For doing the devotion of saying, is it okay to be a leader and a follower? Because at that point in time, I'm like, Lord, help me lead them. But I'm trying to hold on to you. I'm trying to follow you. I'm trying to do this, to hold on, so that for these kids, I can show them you. And so by Friday, I was feeling great. I was feeling, better. And then we did hot seat. And my kids start to tell me, like, hey, Denzel, I really appreciate you. You're a great leader. You seem to have everything under control. And I was like, I don't. You always have a testimony for me. We listen to you. We enjoy your company. You're funny, you're fun, and everything like that. And you always seem to have all this energy. I'm like, I don't. But one of my kids, he was a captain of the quiet team. And so I was like, I'm sitting here this whole week. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on in his head. Like, I look at his face, and it's like blank. And I'm like, okay. I don't even know. And so I prayed for him, and I prophesied over him. God gave me the words to say. And so on the hot seat, he was like, that day that you prayed for me, a few minutes beforehand, I gave my life to Christ. And so that really moved on me. How God's saying, you know what? Yes, you can be there for them, and I will show you how to be a light to them, and I'll show you that I am operating through you, that I am here and you are showing them Christ while you're learning how to show them Christ.
Danny.
I just want to start off by thanking everybody and all the camp staff, and especially Billy and Jessica for putting everything together and giving me the opportunity to even be a part of camp again. So I want to start my testimony by bringing up an imitator that I look to for everything since I was a kid is my dad. Everything I would do, everything I would want to do, I would look to him to see what I needed to do and who I needed to be, because he's, in my eyes, the perfect gentleman, the perfect man, who you want to be. And especially from last year when I had Mario as my counselor, I realized, like, I'm going to be away from my family for a week. Mario's going to be my dad for a week, basically. So looking up to Mario last year was an inspiration to me. I looked to him to know what I needed to be. I wanted to imitate him. So I would notice things that he would do, like get up super early in the morning. And I know he would go for runs, but I know he would go and he would run, but he would be alone with God and just some time to get away from everything and really pray. So that was something I took away from him. And this year I would get up every morning at 6 o'clock just to be by myself or with other people to pray and get closer to God. So things like that would just inspire me, and I know that was bringing me closer to God. But another thing I noticed was a year ago, I was a child. I'm looking up to somebody, and now this year, I'm going to be in his position. I'm the person that they're going to be looking up to. How am I going to meet those standards? And I had a lot of worry going into camp, thinking, how am I going to do that? How am I going to be somebody that people can look up to, these kids can look up to? And I had, middle schoolers. They're about 14, 13 years old. And I just had no idea what to do. So leading up to camp, I had been praying to God, like, how can I get closer to you? What can I do to get closer to you? And honestly, whether I saw it or not, nothing was happening. I didn't see anything happening. I was looking for it. But I noticed after camp that it happened at camp. It was these kids, when I would pray over them, and I prayed over a lot of people at camp, but when you pray over somebody, as well as them, you are getting closer to God as well. And that's what I didn't realize, is by praying over somebody and helping them get closer to God, you yourself are also getting closer to God. And that was something that I just had to be patient for, even if I wasn't, but it happened, and I'm so thankful for that. And I don't want to sound selfish here, because I'm not trying to be selfish, but I had a kid come up to me. One of my boys comes up to me during the foot washing, and he starts praying over me and says that I'm the reason why he wants to get closer to God. And again, I'm not trying to sound selfish. This is God working through me to bring him closer to God. And I don't cry a lot, but I almost broke down. Even right now, I started tearing up, and it was just something that I never thought would happen. It hit me so hard, and those are the things that really brought me closer to God, and I'm just so thankful for the opportunity, and so.
Hallie.
So before I went to camp this year, I was absolutely dreading it for multiple reasons, but one of the big ones that was kind of a secret was I took understanding God this year because I was saved last year at camp. That was my first time I'd ever experienced God or anything. So I took understanding God, and I was like, these kids are 12 and they're bigger than me and they know everything. So going to camp, I was like, I'm going to be in a cabin with all these people, and I'm in either going to be the oldest girls' cabin or the second oldest, and I'm going to be the dumbest one in there or something. And I got there and I realized that I was completely wrong because, first of all, it didn't matter because I knew as much as I needed to know, but every single night, God was working something in my heart. I was really upset about something, and I started praying, and I started crying, and I felt immediately better. I slept really well. Tuesday, I started bawling, and I can't even remember the reason why for that one, but it was also great. Wednesday, not only did more people pray over me than I thought would, but I prayed over someone else for the very first time. And that was a big deal for me. And then Thursday, we had our JV journals, and we wrote them all down, and I ripped mine in half before I threw it in the fire, and I felt all of this weight that was like surrounding my heart just like fly into the air. And I remember sitting in the cabin that night, and we were all my girls, and we were sitting there on the beds just talking, and I kind of zoned out for a minute, and I almost started crying because I was like, this is the first time in almost 11 years that I haven't felt any anxiety. So I had an incredible year at camp, and I would encourage anyone to go back, and I hope that I get to go back as a counselor or something, but it was just one of the best experiences of my life.
Yes, you rock. Is that Miles? Is that? So testimonies are just so important, and one thing that I just get so excited about is that for 4 or 5 years, if you hear people talk about Billy, that's the youth pastor, and him and I have been working so close these past couple years, really trying to bridge the gap between the youth and the young adult ministry, because what was happening a few years ago is it was just this awkward, like, wow, now I'm kind of like kicked out of the youth ministry and I have to go to this young adult ministry, and I don't really know anyone, and I feel young, and I don't really know the pastor of the young adult ministry because I've spent so many years with the youth pastor. So we've really been trying to bridge this gap. And this year it was so awesome because we had how many staff? 40 staff. That's all from 412. And I just think that's so awesome to see how the transition between becoming a camper and then graduating and now being able to staff and really reach out to the younger kids. It's been a really awesome thing for, I know, both him and I to just see this younger generation come up and really start leading the even younger generation. And the whole purpose when we started 412 was really that you would just become leaders and start being able to walk in everything that God has called you to be, and knowing that you don't have to be a pastor, you don't have to be in a specific light to be able to minister to people, but really knowing that in every area of your life that we're all called to be leaders. And so it's been really awesome. So that's why I'm just excited about the testimonies that were given tonight. And I know there's a lot of you out there who may have a testimony from camp, and maybe you have a testimony that's not from camp and you didn't get the chance to share it tonight, but I just encourage you to go share it with someone, because again, you never know who can be impacted and how they can be impacted by the testimony of what God is doing and has done in your life. So if we could just pray tonight.